Ever wondered why big names like Harmony Korine, Dax Shepard, and Bobcat Goldthwait were banned from late-night TV shows? Stick around until the end as we reveal the shocking reasons these celebrities got kicked off the stage. You won't believe what went down.
Encyclopedia of any great crime that's happened here.
Harmony Korine's infamous ban from Letterman. Have you ever let your curiosity get the best of you, only to regret it later? For director Harmony Korine, best known for Spring Breakers, that moment came in the late 90s during an appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman, and it cost him a spot on the show for years. Korine, infamous for his unpredictable and often erratic behavior, especially during his drug-fueled days of crack and heroin use, made several bizarre appearances on Letterman. However, one particular incident went down in history for all the wrong reasons. One night, as Letterman went backstage to greet actress Meryl Streep before her segment, he knocked on her dressing room door, only to find Korine rummaging through her purse. Whether it was out of pure curiosity or something more dubious remains unclear, but one thing was certain: Letterman wasn't having it. He immediately told Korine to stop, put everything back, and leave. That incident led to Korine being banned from the show. Years later, in 2013, when Korine's friend James Franco was a guest on Letterman, the host finally revealed the real reason behind the ban. While Korine had previously claimed it was because he had pushed Meryl Streep backstage, Letterman clarified that the true reason was the purse incident. But here's the twist. Over time, Korine got sober, and eventually, Letterman forgave him. The ban was lifted, and Korine was invited back on the show, marking the end of a long-standing Hollywood legend.
Evening eating dinner together is what happened.
Dax Shepard's wild night before Conan. Imagine waking up in a hotel room with no memory of the night before, only to realize you're about to go on live TV. That's exactly what happened to Dax Shepard in 2004, and the story he later shared is unforgettable. Dax has always been open about his past struggles with drugs and alcohol, but one of the wildest moments of his life happened during an appearance on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. He later recounted the chaotic experience on Blake Griffin's podcast, The Pursuit of Healthiness. Before the interview, Dax had done a pre-interview with the show's team, but he had been in a complete blackout from drinking. The next morning, he woke up in his hotel room, completely confused, with hotel security shaking him awake. Next to him was a stranger, and to make matters worse, either he or the stranger had peed the bed. With only 20 minutes until his interview, Dax had no recollection of what he was supposed to talk about. When he arrived on set, Conan started asking about the stories they had prepped, but Dax had no clue what he was referring to. Things spiraled further when he accidentally broke a coffee table during the interview, turning the whole situation into a disaster. As a result, Dax was banned from the show for several years. Years later, after getting sober, Dax returned to Conan and brought up the infamous coffee table incident. Conan laughed it off, saying, "2/3 of our guests are wasted, so I wouldn't worry about that." In the end, all was forgiven.
And Patton Oswalt had said, he said,
Bobcat Goldthwait's infamous Tonight Show fire stunt. What happens when a comedian with a wild sense of humor decides to set his chair on fire during a live TV interview? In 1994, Bobcat Goldthwait turned his Tonight Show appearance into an unforgettable disaster. Invited as a guest on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, Bobcat didn't just settle in for a typical chat. He took things to a whole new level. Midway through the interview, he pulled out a hidden lighter and doused his chair with lighter fluid before setting it ablaze. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. He had carefully planned the stunt, sneaking in both the lighter and fluid up his sleeve. As flames spread, Leno and fellow guest Lauren Hutton scrambled to put out the fire, throwing cups of water on the chair. Though they managed to contain it, the damage was done. Leno was furious, and Bobcat wasn't just banned from the show. He became the first Tonight Show guest to face criminal charges. Charged with arson, he was fined $3,880, some of which went to NBC to replace the scorched chair. Additionally, he was required to film fire safety PSAs as part of his punishment. Despite the serious consequences, Bobcat remained unapologetic. In a 1996 interview, he quipped, "I'm not an arsonist, I'm a satirist. If I were an arsonist, I would have been sexually aroused on The Tonight Show. Instead, I was just as bored as the rest of America. While the stunt landed him in hot water, it also cemented Bobcat's Tonight Show appearance as one for the history books.
When I met his mother, we were going to junior college in Coffeyville, Kansas.
Gary Busey's wild and unforgettable Howard Stern appearance. Ever had someone completely invade your personal space and act like it was totally normal? That's exactly what happened in 2001, when actor Gary Busey appeared on The Howard Stern Show, and things quickly spiraled into chaos. Known for his unpredictable and eccentric behavior, Busey wasted no time making his presence felt. Without warning, he grabbed Stern's co-host, Robin Quivers, in an enormous bear hug, catching everyone in the studio off guard. But he didn't stop there. Busey then turned his attention to Howard Stern himself, chasing him around the studio and attempting to wrestle him to the ground. The scene was equal parts hilarious, bizarre, and uncomfortable. When asked about his antics later, Busey didn't exactly take responsibility. Instead, he blamed the outburst on one of his many personality parts. He explained, "I have 13 separate personality parts that I know of. That personality you saw on Howard Stern that day, that was Pesky, the excitable boy." In other words, Busey wasn't acting out. Pesky was. After that chaotic episode, Busey was banned from the show for years, but in 2017, he made a surprising return for a radio-only interview, appearing much calmer than before. Despite his newfound composure, his 2001 appearance remained one of the most talked-about moments in Howard Stern show history, a perfect example of how any encounter with Gary Busey could turn from a simple interview into a full-blown circus.
As I was floundering between unwatchable...
Hugh Grant's infamous Daily Show appearance ever had a guest who made everything awkward, even when they were there to promote something? In 2012, Jon Stewart revealed his least favorite guest on The Daily Show, and the answer was surprising. Actor Hugh Grant. During an interview with Stephen Colbert, Stewart explained that, despite hosting everyone from A-list celebrities to world leaders, Grant stood out for all the wrong reasons. According to Stewart, Grant spent most of his time complaining to the production staff, acting as if he had better things to do. Things escalated when Stewart played a promotional clip from Grant's film, Did You Hear About the Morgans? A clip that had been provided by Grant's own publicist. Unhappy with the selection, Grant complained about it, prompting Stewart to fire back with a blunt response. Well then, make a better movie. He later made it clear that Grant would never be invited back on the show. After Stewart's comments went public, Grant responded with surprising self-awareness, tweeting, "Turns out my inner crab got the better of me with TV producers in 09. Unforgivable. Jon Stewart is correct to give me a kicking." The exchange became a memorable moment in late-night TV history, showcasing Stewart's no-nonsense approach to difficult guests and Grant's rare moment of self-reflection. It was a reminder that even celebrities have off days, but sometimes the truth stings, especially when it comes from Jon Stewart.
Hey, Leno!
Howard Stern versus Jay Leno, a feud that won't die. What happens when two entertainment giants can't stand each other? For Howard Stern and Jay Leno, their long-running feud began with a chaotic Tonight Show appearance in 1995, and it has lasted for decades. The bad blood started when Stern appeared as a guest on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. True to form, Stern ignored all conventions, walking on stage with two bikini-clad women and encouraging them to kiss. As the segment went on, he hijacked the conversation, constantly interrupting Leno and even talking over fellow guests like film critics Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. Leno was reportedly furious. He nearly walked off set and was overheard shouting at Stern's producer, accusing Stern of asterisk, 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 asterisk in his house. After the show, Leno even called into Stern's radio program to vent, saying the shock jock had crossed the line. From that moment on, Stern made no effort to hide his disdain for Leno. He regularly mocked him on his radio show and in interviews, even weighing in on Leno's well-known feuds with Conan O'Brien and David Letterman. He also accused Leno of stealing his material, adding fuel to the fire. Leno, for the most part, remained quiet, occasionally questioning Stern's relevance. But tensions flared again in 2004 when Leno hired stuttering John Melendez, a former Howard Stern show staffer. Stern saw it as plagiarism and called Leno out publicly. In response, Leno invited Stern to appear on The Tonight Show to settle their differences. But Stern refused, keeping the rivalry alive. Even years later, their feud remains one of the most infamous in entertainment, proving that some grudges just don't fade.
Sixth College of the University of California, San Diego, announced that they were going to name
Conan O'Brien versus Jay Leno, the late-night feud that shook TV. The world of late-night television was thrown into chaos in 2010 by a bitter feud between two of its biggest stars, Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien. Their rivalry became a textbook example of corporate mismanagement, clashing egos, and behind-the-scenes drama spilling into the public eye. It all began in 2004 when NBC made a promise to Conan O'Brien, then host of Late Night, that he would inherit The Tonight Show from Jay Leno in 2009. For Conan, who had spent years building his career, this was a dream come true. But when the time came, Leno wasn't ready to give up his late-night throne. Unwilling to lose either host, NBC came up with a controversial plan. They launched The Jay Leno Show, a primetime program in 2009. However, the ratings flopped, creating even more problems. In a desperate attempt to fix the situation, NBC decided to move Leno back into late night, bumping The Tonight Show to a later time slot. This left Conan in an impossible position, and as his ratings plummeted, NBC ultimately paid him to walk away. Though Leno reclaimed The Tonight Show, the damage to his reputation was done. Many viewed him as unwilling to step aside gracefully, and he faced backlash for not honoring the deal with Conan. Meanwhile, Conan, deeply disappointed by the experience, moved on to his own show on TBS. But when asked if he'd ever invite Leno as a guest, Conan didn't hesitate. "No, there are certain things I will not do, regardless of the price." Even years later, the fallout from this late-night shakeup remains one of the most talked-about controversies in television history.
Bobby Brown comes out on stage and saying, "My prerogative."
Kathy Griffin, the queen of controversy and quiet bans. Kathy Griffin is no stranger to controversy. From stripping on live TV to posting a shocking photo of beheaded Donald Trump, she has built a career on pushing boundaries. But with that notoriety comes consequences. Griffin has found herself banned from multiple major talk shows over the years. She was temporarily banned from The Late Show for excessive swearing, a ban that was later lifted. She also landed in hot water on Today for mocking the hosts and on The View, after making an inappropriate joke about Howard Stern and Barbara Walters. Even The Ellen DeGeneres Show was no longer an option after Griffin accused Ellen of having a mean streak and failing to support women. However, Ellen dismissed the idea of a ban, stating, "I didn't ban her from the show. You have to be on the show to be banned." Instead of formal bans, Griffin has experienced what she calls the silent treatment from Hollywood. In her memoir, she explained, "It's not like anyone tells you you've been banned. You just figure it out when you stop getting booked." She even recalled how she was invited onto Late Night with Conan O'Brien a few times, only to be ignored for the next decade. Though Griffin has learned to accept this unspoken blacklist, she remains unapologetic, continuing to stir the pot and challenge the entertainment industry's rules. Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman, the mysterious feud that took years to solve. What do you do when you're stuck in a long-running feud but have no idea how it even started? That was the case for Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman, who spent 6 years caught in an odd, silent rivalry without either of them knowing why. It all began in 1989 when Oprah appeared on Late Night with David Letterman. After that interview, she stopped accepting invitations to return, despite Letterman repeatedly reaching out. Neither of them could pinpoint exactly what went wrong. In 2005, Oprah finally returned to Letterman's show to address the tension, directly asking him, "Could you tell me please what transpired? I have never, for a moment, had a feud with you." Letterman, just as baffled, had no clear answer. However, in a 2010 interview with Jon Stewart, he shared his own theory. He suspected Oprah's dislike stemmed from a lunch incident years earlier. While vacationing at the same restaurant, Letterman jokingly told the waiter that Oprah would be covering his bill, something he believed may have annoyed her. The real reason for Oprah's absence didn't come to light until 2013. During an episode of Oprah's Next Chapter, she finally explained why she had stayed away for so long. Her first late-night appearance had been a terrible experience. The audience was rowdy, and one person kept shouting, "Get her, Dave!" Oprah felt uncomfortable and believed Letterman was encouraging the chaos. Not wanting to go through that again, she simply avoided the show. In the end, Oprah and Letterman were able to clear up the misunderstanding, finally putting their mysterious feud to rest after all those years.
You know, all that talk ain't gonna matter. You know, let me see what you look like.
Vivica A. Fox and Jimmy Kimmel, the interview that went off the rails. Ever had a conversation take such a bad turn that you just had to walk away? That's exactly what happened between Vivica A. Fox and Jimmy Kimmel during her 2005 appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Things got off to a rough start when Kimmel introduced Fox by highlighting her impressive career, only to follow it up with a jab, saying, "And most harrowing of all, Star Jones's bridesmaid." Fox, who was there to promote her Lifetime movie Missing, didn't find the joke about her friend Star Jones funny at all. She immediately called Kimmel out, making it clear she wasn't amused. Trying to diffuse the tension, Kimmel quipped, "It goes both ways. I'm desperate to make this work." But instead of backing off, he kept bringing up Jones, pushing Fox to her limit. Finally, fed up, she stood up and walked off the set, leaving Kimmel with an empty chair and an awkward silence. The uncomfortable exchange stuck with him for years, and he later admitted that Fox was one guest he would never invite back. What started as a lighthearted joke quickly spiraled into an unexpected confrontation, one that neither Fox nor Kimmel would soon forget. Piers Morgan versus Madonna, a one-sided feud. Imagine being in a public feud where one person doesn't even acknowledge the conflict. That's exactly what happened between Piers Morgan and Madonna, resulting in a bizarre and seemingly one-sided grudge that played out in the media. Morgan never hid his disdain for Madonna, repeatedly stating that she was not welcome on his CNN show, Piers Morgan Tonight. He called her boring and annoying, but when asked why, his reasoning was unusual. He claimed their history included a bizarre bread roll throwing incident in London in the 90s, an awkward hotel encounter at the Cannes Film Festival, and a dispute at a pub owned by Madonna's ex-husband, Guy Ritchie, where Morgan's brother worked. Despite Madonna never publicly addressing the so-called feud, Morgan continued to take jabs at her. He once said she was too vegan for TV, and insisted that interviewing Lady Gaga would be far more interesting. When Madonna tweeted about promoting her new album, Morgan wasted no time reminding her that she was still banned from his show. The situation took an unexpected turn when Madonna's manager posted an email from Morgan's team inviting her to appear on his show. Morgan quickly clarified that the invitation was for his UK show, not the US one, before doubling down, confirming that Madonna was banned from both. What began as a few offhand insults escalated into a long-running grudge, with Piers Morgan making it abundantly clear, whether Madonna cared or not, that she was not welcome in his studio.
There is a point. Is there a point to all this? Let's find a point.
Bill Hicks, the comedian, too controversial for TV. What does it take for a comedian to be banned from a major television show? For Bill Hicks, it was his fearless, boundary-pushing humor, considered too provocative for mainstream audiences. Between 1984 and 1993, Hicks made 11 appearances on Late Night with David Letterman, becoming a familiar and well-received guest. But when he returned for his 12th performance in 1993, this time on The Late Show after its move to CBS, his set was deemed too controversial to air. Despite getting laughs from both the audience and Letterman himself, CBS cut his routine, replacing it with another comedian. Hicks was known for using comedy as a tool to challenge societal norms and question authority. That night, his set touched on hot-button issues like pro-life activists, the Easter Bunny, and religious symbolism. One of his most memorable jokes questioned why Christians wore crosses, asking if Jesus would really want to see the very instrument of his suffering everywhere. He quipped, "Maybe that's why he hasn't come back yet. I'll return as a bunny." At the time, Hicks hadn't shared his devastating diagnosis, pancreatic cancer, which would claim his life just months later in 1994. CBS downplayed the controversy, shifting blame onto the show's producers, but the decision to censor him remained a sore point in comedy history. In 2009, 15 years after Hicks's passing, Letterman made amends by inviting his mother, Mary Hicks, onto The Late Show, and finally airing the unaired set. It was a long overdue recognition of a comedian whose work wasn't just about getting laughs. It was about making people think, no matter how uncomfortable it made them.
Saying, "Oh, the good life," kind of in my best Tony Bennett.
Kelsey Grammer walks off Piers Morgan's show over a single photo. Ever seen a celebrity storm off a TV set over a seemingly minor mistake? That's exactly what happened in 2012 when Kelsey Grammer appeared on Piers Morgan Tonight. Or, rather, almost did. Grammer had one simple request before the interview. Do not show any photos of his ex-wife, Camille Grammer. While he was open to discussing his third wife and their contentious divorce, he wanted nothing to do with his past marriage. However, just before the interview began, a photo of Camille appeared in the show's opening credits. That was enough for Grammer. He immediately got up and walked off the set, leaving Piers Morgan stunned. The host later tweeted, "So Kelsey Grammer saw a photo of his ex-wife Camille in the open of our show and legged it. Extraordinary. Never had this happen before. I like Kelsey personally, but this was a shockingly unprofessional thing to do. I wasn't even going to mention his ex-wife." Grammer's publicist, Stan Rosenfield, fired back, saying, "Piers needs to take responsibility for what he did to Kelsey. It's called accountability." Morgan, unfazed, responded by officially banning Grammer from ever returning to the show. But Grammer seemed unbothered, with his team making it clear they had no interest in engaging further in the drama.
But who dreams of being a one-man show hit on Broadway in such dimension?
Jackie Mason's career nearly ended over a simple misunderstanding. Ever wondered how a small misunderstanding could almost destroy a comedian's career? That's exactly what happened to Jackie Mason in 1964, after an unexpected incident on The Ed Sullivan Show. Mason had become a regular on the show, gaining recognition for his sharp humor. But during one fateful performance, things went terribly wrong. While he was on stage, Mason noticed Ed Sullivan off-camera making a two-finger gesture, signaling that he had 2 minutes left before the show was cut short for President Lyndon Johnson's speech. In a playful response, Mason pointed back with his thumb and index finger. Unfortunately, from Sullivan's angle, it looked like Mason had flipped him off. Outraged, Sullivan immediately banned Mason from the show and canceled his contract for 6 more scheduled appearances. The fallout was severe. Mason struggled to book television gigs, and his reputation took a major hit. He even sued Sullivan for defamation, but the case was eventually dismissed. 2 years later, Sullivan realized the misunderstanding and lifted the ban. He invited Mason back on the show and publicly apologized for the mix-up. What started as a minor miscommunication nearly derailed Mason's career, proving just how unpredictable the entertainment industry can be.
I waited for you too long.
I beg your pardon. I flew in because we did
Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson. A friendship turned feud. Imagine having someone help launch your career, only for everything to fall apart over one major decision. That's exactly what happened between Joan Rivers and Johnny Carson. When Rivers was starting out in comedy, she fought hard to break through in a male-dominated industry. Her big break came when she appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Overnight, her career skyrocketed. She became a regular guest, making nearly 100 appearances, and was often Carson's go-to guest host. She credited him for her success and remained loyal, turning down other offers along the way. But by the mid-1980s, things changed. Despite her longtime contributions to The Tonight Show, she was never offered a permanent role. When rumors swirled about Carson's retirement, Rivers discovered she wasn't even being considered as his replacement. Feeling overlooked, she made a bold move, signing with Fox to host her own late-night show. Knowing Carson could be difficult, Rivers initially kept the news from him. When it finally broke, she tried to call him to explain, but Carson reportedly hung up on her every time. Carson later insisted she never called at all. The fallout was brutal. Rivers was permanently banned from The Tonight Show, and Carson made it clear that any guests appearing on her show risked being blacklisted from his. In her memoir, Rivers reflected on the painful rift. She believed Carson saw her as his protege and took her decision as a personal betrayal. "I think he really felt that because I was a woman, I just was his, that I wouldn't leave him," she wrote. Carson and Rivers never spoke again before his death in 2005. Even after Jay Leno took over The Tonight Show, the ban remained in place out of respect for Carson. It wasn't until Jimmy Fallon's first night as host in 2014 that Rivers finally made her return, just 6 months before she passed away. Despite the infamous feud, Rivers left behind a legacy of resilience and groundbreaking comedy that continues to inspire.